Imagine waking up in the middle of January. Your heater is dead, your smartphone battery just plunged from 80% to zero in 3 seconds because of the cold, and the water in your toilet bowl is solid ice. You try to call an emergency technician, but the cell towers are down. Your immediate reaction is probably absolute panic. You scramble for three thick duvets, crawl under them, and pray that the power comes back before your toes start turning blue. Now imagine that this exact scenario isn't a temporary emergency. It is not a power outage, and it is not a freak storm. For your prehistoric ancestors, this was just a typical Tuesday afternoon. No fleece jackets, no double-paned windows, and definitely no smart thermostats. Yet they did not freeze to death, they did not die out. So how did they survive? On paper, humans are basically the worst designed animals for cold weather. We are tropical primates. We have no insulating fur. We do not have layers of blubber like seals, and we cannot just curl up and sleep for 6 months like cave bears. If you dump a naked modern human into a sub-zero blizzard, they will succumb to hypothermia in less than an hour. Yet, during the last ice age, when glaciers covered half of Europe and North America, our ancestors did not just survive in these freezing regions, they thrived. The answer to how they did it is not one single thing. It is a stack of small, incredibly clever survival hacks. And the weird part is, the most important solution was not a weapon or a bigger fire. Once you understand the sheer engineering that went into prehistoric winter survival, you will realize that our ancestors were far from primitive. To understand how prehistoric humans survived the cold, we first have to look at the two different types of humans that faced it: Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Neanderthals had a head start. They had lived in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years before Homo sapiens arrived, and their bodies had physically evolved to handle the cold. If you saw a Neanderthal today, they would look like they were built for a rugby match. They adhered to two biological rules, Bergmann's rule and Allen's rule. Bergmann's rule states that larger, stockier bodies conserve heat better because they have less surface area relative to their volume. Think of it like a sphere versus a cylinder. A sphere retains heat much better because it has the minimum surface area for its volume. Neanderthals were shorter, broader, and had barrel-shaped chests. Allen's rule states that animals in cold climates evolve shorter limbs to minimize heat loss. Neanderthals had shorter arms and legs compared to us, keeping their warm blood closer to their vital organs. Their faces were also different. Their noses were massive, and their mid-faces were pulled forward, which helped warm and humidify the freezing air before it reached their lungs. Furthermore, they had a higher resting metabolic rate, acting like a furnace that burned massive amounts of energy just to keep their core temperature up. But then came Homo sapiens. Our direct ancestors migrated out of warm, tropical Africa and walked straight into the European Ice Age. Physically, Homo sapiens were tall, lean, and utterly unsuited for the cold. We were tropical apes trying to live in a giant freezer. Lacking the built-in biological insulation of Neanderthals, Homo sapiens had to rely entirely on cultural and technological innovations. If we couldn't adapt our bodies, we had to adapt our behavior. To keep a biological furnace burning in the winter, you need fuel, lots of it. In a modern winter, you might consume a few extra hot chocolates, but your daily caloric needs stay roughly the same. For an Ice Age human, however, caloric math was a matter of life and death. In sub-zero temperatures, the body shivers to generate heat, which is basically your muscles running in place. Shivering and maintaining core temperature can double your daily energy expenditure. A Neanderthal or early Homo sapiens in winter needed between 4,000 and 5,500 calories every single day. For comparison, that is the daily intake of a professional modern athlete or a heavy-duty construction worker. But where do you get 5,000 calories when all the plants, berries, and nuts are dead or buried under 6 feet of snow? The answer is fat. During the winter, prehistoric humans became extreme carnivores. They hunted megafauna, mammoths, woolly rhinos, bison, and reindeer. They did not just eat the lean muscle meat. In fact, eating only lean meat in winter could kill you. This is a condition known as rabbit starvation or protein poisoning. If your diet consists of more than 40% protein without enough fat or carbohydrates, Your liver and kidneys cannot process the excess nitrogen, leading to severe diarrhea, nausea, and eventually death. Your body simply cannot survive on protein alone. To avoid this, our ancestors targeted the fattest parts of the animals. They cracked open bones to eat the calorie-dense yellow marrow, consumed fat deposits behind the eyes, and ate organ meats like livers and kidneys, which also provided critical vitamins like vitamin C to prevent scurvy. But hunting a multi-ton mammoth is dangerous, and you cannot do it every day. When they did secure a massive kill, they faced a new problem. How do you preserve hundreds of pounds of meat before it rots? They did not have refrigerators, but they did have the ground. Prehistoric humans invented the first freezers. They dug deep pits into the permafrost, the permanently frozen soil, and packed the meat inside, covering it with heavy stones to keep scavengers away. In some cases, they would submerge carcasses in freezing, low-oxygen peat bogs or peat ponds, which kept the meat fresh and safe from bacteria for months. While a high-fat diet kept their internal furnace running, prehistoric humans still needed to prevent that heat from escaping. This brings us to what might be the single greatest technological invention in human history: the eyed bone needle. Before the needle, humans protected themselves by draping animal skins over their shoulders, fastening them with bone pins. This is what Neanderthals did. But draped hides have a fatal flaw: they leak air. When you walk, cold air rushes in and warm air escapes. Around 26,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began carving needles out of animal bones with tiny eyes to thread sinew or plant fibers. They used tiny flint drills called burins to bore the eyes. This allowed them to sew. Sewing meant they could create tailored, fitted clothing. Instead of a cape, they made trousers, form-fitting boots, mittens, and parkas. Tailored clothing traps a thin layer of air next to the skin, which the body warms up, creating a personal microclimate. They also mastered layering. They wore undergarments made of soft hair or Arctic fox fur with the fur facing inward against the skin, and outer parkas with the fur facing outward to repel wind and snow. They even discovered that sewing wolverine fur around the hoods of their parkas was ideal, because wolverine fur does not collect frost from frozen breath. Next came shelter. Caves are great, but they are cold, damp, drafty, and often filled with angry cave bears. In the open steppes of Eastern Europe, where caves were scarce, humans became master architects. They built circular houses using mammoth bones. They used heavy skulls for the foundation, long tusks to arch over the top as rafters, and covered the entire structure with animal hides, sealing the bottom with dirt for insulation. One shelter could require the bones of up to 95 mammoths. Inside these shelters, they managed fire with incredible precision. They dug hearths with small channels to channel air, creating draft systems that kept the fire burning hot while minimizing toxic smoke. And to light their dark, windowless shelters during the endless winter nights, they used fat lamps. They carved shallow bowls out of stone, filled them with rendered animal fat, and used wicks made of dried moss. These lamps burned slowly and cleanly, providing light and heat without filling the shelter with soot, allowing them to sew, repair tools, and tell stories during the long dark. For a long time, scientists wondered if there was a biological shortcut to winter survival that we had forgotten. In 2020, researchers studying 400 zero-year-old fossilized bones in the Atapuerca cave system in Spain made a shocking proposal. They found seasonal growth disruptions in the bones that looked identical to those found in hibernating cave bears. They suggested that these early hominins might have entered a state of hibernation or torpor, slowing their metabolism down and sleeping through the coldest winter months when food was scarce. It is a fascinating idea. Imagine sleeping through winter like a bear. But the broader scientific community was highly skeptical, and the hibernation theory is now largely rejected. The human brain is an absolute energy hog, consuming 20% of our total metabolic energy even when we are resting. A human-sized brain simply cannot survive months of hibernation without starving. The bone lesions were much more likely caused by vitamin D deficiency from spending too much time in dark caves, or from winter starvations, rather than an evolutionary superpower. Instead, the real evolutionary superpower of prehistoric humans was not a biological trick. It was social. Solitary survival in an Ice Age winter was practically impossible. If you were injured, sick, or simply had a bad hunting week, you died. To survive, humans built highly cooperative social networks. We see evidence of this in fossils like Shanidar 1, a Neanderthal who had a crushed eye, an amputated arm, and severe arthritis. Yet, he lived to an old age. The only way he survived was because his group fed him, kept him warm, and protected him through multiple brutal winters. Furthermore, archaeological evidence shows that early humans traded obsidian, flint, and shells over hundreds of miles. This means different bands of humans were actively communicating and maintaining relationships. If a severe winter storm wiped out the reindeer herds in one valley, a human tribe could move to an adjacent valley inhabited by a friendly band they had traded with. They shared food, shared fire, and shared shelter. We survived the winter not because we were individually tough, but because we were socially connected. Ultimately, the story of how prehistoric humans survived winter is not a story of physical strength. It is a story of cognitive adaptation. We did not grow thick fur like the woolly mammoth, nor did we develop the cold-adapted physiology of the Neanderthal. In fact, Neanderthals, despite their biological advantages, eventually went extinct, while the physically weaker Homo sapiens survived. We survived because we stopped waiting for evolution to change our bodies. Instead, we used our brains to change our environment. We invented the needle to build personal microclimates. We engineered hearths and lamps to control fire. We turned frozen ground into refrigerators, and we built cooperative networks that stretched across continents. Every time you turn up your thermostat, put on a winter jacket, or open your refrigerator, you are not using modern technology. You are using the exact same principles that kept your ancestors warm around a cave fire 20,000 years ago. What do you think? If you were transported back to the Ice Age, what modern comfort would you miss the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look into prehistoric survival, make sure to hit that subscribe button. See you next time.